Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're taking a look at a really fascinating puzzle from the past to decode the hidden systems that kept the world running. We are stepping way back into the late 19th century, specifically 1895, to look at a surprisingly gripping logistical nightmare. Imagine a time where moving from one city to another was just a massive ordeal. You're limited by horse-drawn carts, the sheer endurance of human feet, and the booming, smoke-filled promise of the steam train. We're going to break down the exact rules governing a very specific, incredibly high-stakes type of travel.
Let's put you in the shoes of an 1895 government official for a second. You've got a prison full of people, and occasionally you've got to move them. But here's the catch. You don't have armored transport vans. No GPS, no helicopters. You literally just have dirt roads, a pretty new railway network, and miles of empty space between towns. So how do you safely move a potentially dangerous person across the country without them, escaping into the wilderness, or your guards getting ambushed? Well, you'd need an absolutely airtight system.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our core artifact for today's Explainer. It's a remarkably well-preserved type memo, circular number 4 of 1895. I mean, just look at the crispness of this document. It's over a century old, but it maps out the exact rules of engagement for moving prisoners so clearly. It's way more than just a piece of paper. It's literally a window into the mind of a Victorian-era bureaucracy that's desperately trying to keep order over these vast territories. So let's break down exactly what this thing says.
Section 1. A voice from 1895. Decoding the metadata.
Right, so before we look at the actual rules, we've got to understand who's even speaking. Context is huge here. The header of the circular gives us the entire chain of command. Look at the specific details. It was issued on May 18, 1895, out of Lucknow, which was a massive administrative hub in British India. And these orders, they're coming straight from the top guy, the Inspector General of Prisons. Plus, they're directed to a massive audience, basically all superintendents of jails across the northwestern provinces and UD. So this isn't just some friendly suggestion among coworkers. No way. This is a top-down blanket mandate covering an enormous geographical area to unify how every single local jail operates.
Now, what's really interesting is how clearly the subject line presents our main conflict. It's typed right there in bold, spaced out letters, transfer of prisoners by rail or road. It's a strict binary choice. At this point in history, the railway network was expanding like wildfire. It meant security, it meant speed, and it meant modern control. The road, on the other hand, that was the old world, slow, totally unpredictable, and highly vulnerable. This memo exists to essentially settle that rail versus road debate once and for all.
Section 2. The Railway Mandate. The Prime Directive of 1895.
The Inspector General doesn't mess around here. He lays down a primary overriding rule that every single jail superintendent had to follow before even thinking about other options. To read it in that very formal, commanding voice of the era, it says, "Wherever railway communication is available, all prisoners shall travel by rail." That is a hard, absolute mandate. The government poured a ton of money into this new rail infrastructure, and they absolutely intended to use it for state security. If there's a train track going to your destination, boom, the debate is over. You take the train. But, as with any strict rule, the bureaucracy had to carve out some specific edge cases.
Section 3. Logistical nightmares. The non-negotiable conditions.
Even if a train station isn't perfectly convenient, there are certain situations where the Inspector General explicitly says the road is completely off the table. These if-then scenarios brilliantly show us their top priority, which was risk management. Condition A is super straightforward. If the prisoners are important or dangerous, they go on a train, period. You are absolutely not marching a high-profile political prisoner or some known escape artist down miles of unpoliced dirt roads. The controlled environment of a railway carriage was basically the 1895 version of a maximum security transport vehicle.
Then we get Condition B, which points out a fascinating, super practical safety concern. Think about a multi-day journey on foot or in a cart. When the sun goes down, we have to stop, right? But where on earth do you securely hold prisoners overnight in the middle of nowhere? You can't just pitch a tent and sing campfire songs. The rule clearly states that if the journey requires a halt and there is no intermediate police station on the route to lock them up in, you cannot take the road. The risk of them just slipping away into the dark was way too high.
Section 4. The Magistrate's Discretion. The Bureaucratic Math.
Okay, so what about your standard, everyday prisoners just moving between neighboring towns? Well, bureaucracies love their quantifiable metrics, and this memo used strict numerical cutoffs to make decisions. The first huge metric is the number 8. The memo sets a hard threshold for the size of the prisoner party. If the group has more than 8 persons, it automatically triggers mandatory rail travel. Why 8? Well, once you get past that number, you're not just moving a small group anymore, you're managing a crowd. And a crowd needs more guards, more food, and it exponentially ramps up the risk of a riot or a mass escape out on the open road.
The second hard limit they set is the number 2, specifically 2 days. If a road journey cannot be finished in 2 days, it's just too long. In this context, time literally equals exposure. The longer your guards and prisoners are out exposed to the elements, dealing with bad weather, exhaustion, and maybe even outside interference, the more likely the whole system is going to completely break down.
Let's see how this all builds together into a pretty clear mathematical formula. If the party is greater than 8 people and the journey takes more than 2 days, you must use the rail, no exceptions. But if you've got 8 or fewer prisoners and it's a short trip of 2 days or less, that strict mandate just drops away. You officially enter the zone of exception.
So the crucial point here is that for these smaller, short-distance transfers, the ultimate authority actually shifts. It leaves the Inspector General's desk in Lucknow and lands right on the desk of the local district magistrate. They get the power to lay down the general rules for their specific district or just make the call on a case-by-case basis. They literally had to sit there and weigh the financial cost of buying train tickets against the manpower cost of paying guards to go on a 2-day walk. It's a perfect historical example of a centralized policy allowing for localized practical execution.
Section 5. Bureaucracy behind bars. The reality of 1895 logistics. Let's zoom out from the microscopic details for a second. What does this single piece of typed paper actually tell us about the broader machinery of history? Check out the very bottom of the document. The signature, J.W. Tyler, Inspector General. This one guy sitting in his office, signing his name, effectively shaped the daily physical realities, the literal footsteps of thousands of guards, police officers, and prisoners across a huge chunk of the world. This really represents the incredible reach of administration back then, using the relatively new tech of typewriters and printing presses to completely standardize human movement across hundreds of miles.
We might not use horse-drawn carts anymore, and thankfully our trains are a lot faster. But the core dilemma hasn't changed a bit. How do you safely, efficiently, and securely move humans through a really complex world? As you go about your day today, I want to leave you with this final thought. How much of our modern justice system, or honestly, any massive system, is still quietly dictated not by some grand philosophy, but by the simple, stubborn logistics of moving people from point A to point B? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you, and I'll catch you next time.